Bah écoutez, on arrive presque au bout.
Well, this is the home stretch, the last part of a long day. And congratulations so far. Now we have something about frequencies, the consequences for world trade. This is something we've been discussing today and yesterday, and we have here Michael Brouillet. You're in charge of the development of navigation systems. I did that little joke. We have brouillé. Brouillé means jamming. And Laura Brouillet, you're head of cyber project at France Cyber Maritime. Amar Saidani, you are an expert on frequencies at the National French Agency for Frequencies. Anyway, we'll start off with a few definitions. Now, this was, an issue that was not well known to the general public. 2 years ago, when there were, you had planes that couldn't take off because in northern countries. And then this very weekend, there was a collision between two oil tankers where you expect there was some jamming at stake. Dealing with frequencies, what is the story? Well, you're right. First, you need to know what it is we're talking about. Frequencies remain that with which wireless communication is conducted, unlike cables or fiber optics. If you want wireless, you need some medium, and the medium is the frequency. So this is an intangible property that belongs to the states. French state owns the frequency spectrum. These frequencies are run by specialized agencies of the UN. It's called the UIT, the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU. And there are frequencies for various applications. You have frequencies for TV, for radio, for mobile phones, for mobile frequencies, but also for radar, for scientific applications, satellite or ground, and then frequencies for radio navigation or to locate your platform, to localize your platform. And that is probably what happened in the incident you referred to. Now, there's been more problems lately because, of course, you need frequencies for both planes and ships, and this relies on technologies that were developed in the past for conflicts. GPS was used to guide weapon systems, and now you use this for civilian applications. Well, if you want to prevent the GPS from operating or to counter weapon systems, then you use, then other applications get damaged as well. That's a sort of collateral damage. And usually what you have found is nearby collateral damage when there's a conflict zone or when you have a geopolitical situation. So, Michael, what can happen with all these frequencies? Well, for radio navigation, you have a GNSS or GPS, regardless of the constellation, GPS, Galileo, GONASS. You have two possible phenomena. Either you have a jamming of frequencies, it means we don't get any signal at all. And in terms of applications, of operations, you simply haven't got your GPS anymore. Or you have the false, you have spoofing where the user doesn't realize he's in a false position. You tend to trust your electronic system, and so you follow this false position. This is where you get serious risks of collision or different phenomena. So you have spoofing as well as jamming, two different phenomena. Ooh, and is it difficult to jam a frequency? Does it require big systems to do this? Well, I speak under AMA's control here, but it's fairly straightforward and not very costly to jam a GNSS frequency on a rather large scope. I mean, if you have terrorist groups that will prevent attacks on their place, the Houthis in Yemen is a case in point. When you have strategic areas, you have some fairly basic, cheap solutions to protect themselves. But that, of course, will have repercussions for international trade. Yeah, you can buy on Amazon a little device which will jam an area of 10-kilometer radius for $10. I mean, well, with this weekend's collision, you had an example. Other examples where you can. Yes, and indeed, I had two examples. Real cases which occurred recently. Let me tell you what happened last year. For the first time, France came under jamming attacks. I mean, its own satellite or TV broadcasting satellites came under a jamming attack from Russia. This was something we were used to from, say, Iran, that used to do that 15 years ago. But here, it was jamming, but there's another technique which is spoofing. And so what you have here you have two pictures. You have a Dutch TV station, Baby TV, and on the left-hand side, you see the substitution that was done by a Russian operator. And so what for 4-year-old kids, they showed military propaganda on the morning TV show for children. That was a result of spoofing. So we lodged a complaint because a French Eutelsat satellite was affected. On the next slide, you have other examples. And you see that this was not an isolated incident. This was not spoofing. We didn't have alternate content. But what you can see is that depending on the political situation in the country, if you do not want your own citizens to have access to TV programs, say, then you attack the satellite at a given time, which is simply the time allotted by the TV schedule, and you prevent that program to be broadcast. In the second case here, the GPS, well, that dates back some time. I mean, we've seen this before between the North and South Koreas, where GPS was no longer working and planes couldn't land. Planes had to circumvent the area, and these were rather special circumstances. And so there you have examples of something that happened last year, and we still have instances of that, and we are talking with the Russian administration to address this. Well, anyway, this type of jamming we see usually is related to a geopolitical situation where a state wants to prevent a broadcaster to broadcast something. So it can be radio, GPS. Well, the disruptions of GPS systems are collateral effects. I mean, I don't believe that individual planes or ships are targeted. It's a drone that's being targeted, and behind the drone is a ship or a plane. So that's a few examples. But the examples that you have there led to consequences under international law. Laura, I believe you had also pictures of your own. Yes. No, it's further down. Sorry. Yes. So what you have here is jamming areas, but this produced from aerial data. So this data is aggregated on a daily basis, and this is where planes indicate a loss of signal. So when you're flying over Japan, then you're in trouble. Well, there may be military exercise. That was possibly the case there for Japan or France, where the authorities have been are told. But you can see a clear correlation between tense geopolitical solutions and areas where you experience signal jamming. These are areas where ships will go through and lose their GPS signal. But it's not that they are targeted, but going through the Suez Canal. Well, because of the situation there, this is how they lose their GPS. And if you go back 2 slides, right. I don't know if you can see this. We can see this red spot. Yeah, red areas. Yes. So just to tell you where this map comes from, regarding frequencies, the French National Frequency Agency represents France in all international meetings, and we have a conference of parties. The last one took place in Dubai in 2023, and this issue was not initially on the agenda, and that is GPS jamming. And that map was generated by the head of the Office of Broadcasting, not jamming as such, but there are parts of the world where a GPS unavailability was reported. And so when you're in a meeting with 180 countries represented, it can be complicated. So you may see a big red spot somewhere, areas that you know well, and as Europeans, you know exactly what's going on there. But if you look at the Americas, and that's I find this surprising, and that's the conversations I had with Chinese or Russian colleagues. You can see there's lots of them, and that's where we're concerned, because conflicts are not the only reason why suddenly you see these disruptions, and they're in all parts of the world where, for different reasons, due to jamming or spoofing, you have GPS loss. And in these international venues, these issues are taken very seriously, and a resolution was passed, so every country committed to improve the situation. So, I mean, to cooperate, and that's at least where we made a positive step, recognizing the need to address the issue, including amongst warring parties. And
regarding the US, there was a case documented in 2010, interesting, near New York airport. There was a problem every Friday with GPS addressing, and they realized that it was a driver going back home who had a jammer not to be traced. And so beyond belligerence, there are many cases documented about unintentional jamming, but that can have major consequences either on maritime traffic or air traffic. If I address the elephant in the room now, international trade, is it already affected? Yes, absolutely. You can see that in conflict-afflicted areas or those with geopolitical tensions, maritime traffic. It's not because of frequencies that ships don't go at the heart of conflict areas. Yes, of course, but as Paul said, jamming or spoofing, generally you don't necessarily control all the reach of that. So although you only want to jam a small area, you will affect a larger area. So getting closer to conflict areas, that could be dangerous. So you have to avoid that. In that case, it's better to avoid it and follow alternative routes. We could see that there were a few cases of boardings where the ship was spoofed. It was the case in 2023 where the ship was spoofed to go into Iranian waters. So there are some risks. Maybe they are more pronounced around conflict areas, but there are also risks about the ship's integrity or its cargo. So there are things to take into account. Laura, an addition. Yes, absolutely. We've seen some of our members that we work with change some of their trade routes. Instead of going through Suez, they prefer to go around the Cape of Good Hope to limit risks for the hull and the crew, because there were cases of acts of piracy and hostage situations, and so the Navy had to intervene to get them to cross certain tense areas safely. And so it's not just about jamming, but it's all geopolitical tensions, groups that are really located in these strategic areas that are dangerous for international trade. Amar, I could see you respond. Yes, I simply wanted to qualify things. Don't be catastrophists here. I get very few complaints from French ships or planes complaining of losing GPS entirely. Maybe for the reasons you discussed. It's difficult to correlate. These are invisible waves, so it's hard to correlate between the loss of GPS signal and a given action. But still, these are means of transport that have navigational alternatives. GPS dependency is still something to be measured and better expressed. As I'm saying here, it's not because you're getting nothing that nothing's going on. Very often, you need to follow a more virtuous cycle. France is well known as a country for defending its own interests. In this area, it's very important from the moment that you're the victim of such jamming. Even if you're going near a conflict area, it's important to immediately activate diplomatic routes so that, if applicable, and I can prove that, you can get remedies or counterparties, something in exchange, find solutions even with warring parties in order to reduce the rate of occurrence. Okay, on the solution side, you've got the diplomatic route and negotiations. Other technical situations or solutions? For civil aviation, we've been using GPS for about 20 years. And in a way, there's some paranoia about the use of wrong data. So we have systems to correct GPS based on inertial measurement units, which measure the plane's physical motion and travel. So we've been doing that in civil aviation for at least 20 years. And these solutions have been derived and applied to the merchant navy. We are now able to use these systems and port them, apply them to boats. That way you can really check that you haven't been spoofed. We can detect spoofing. Once you've detected it, it's very good, but you need to continue your mission. So we offer solutions that will reset the system on a position that's considered safe and unharmed. That's the solution that we're using, because in a way it's impossible to break, because it's the physical motion of the ship that's measured. Is that expensive? No, given the risk and the value of a ship, no, it's inexpensive, honestly. Laura, what word of advice would you have for all Sunday sailors and long-haul ships captains? Well, first, I hope you won't be in the Red Sea or the Baltic. And I would like to remind you that we didn't wait for the invention of GPS to navigate. So captains are trained to navigate without necessarily using GPS or GNSS. They can use other means, maps, sextants, stars. So you simply need to tell them, these are tense areas, you might lose GPS and therefore communications. It's normal. Once you are clear of that area, it's okay. But you need to make them aware of the fact that GPS is not a cure-all. Sometimes you need to take into account what the tool offers, and you need to call it into question and put it back in its context. Amar, maybe a word of advice? On my side, I have two sorts of advice. The first, as you probably know, France is a country representing the Galileo constellation in the world. Satellites are always represented by a country which is responsible for it. So my first advice is to use Galileo. The people who came before us designed the constellation to use it when you need to do without the GPS system. From that angle, I think that the maritime and aviation community has an interest in demanding from the EU that they have a system that is the most perfected possible, with using all the differentiating factors built into Galileo to free themselves from spoofing and to improve their jamming resistance. It's still a system that has been deployed, it's ready to work, and I think that the European user communities, well, it's in their best interest to beef up their demands about that. My second area of advice is rather administrative, but mostly to make people understand that in order to reduce risk, you always need to try and hit fairly hard and saying that it's not because you're a victim of such incidents that you should stay quiet. Since we're French, we need to speak up, we need to spread the word, and very often our voice carries some weight in negotiations. If you would like to move on to the last slide, I wanted to inform the audience. Our agency, ANFR, has been working for years on GPS jamming, and my colleague Catherine Gamet, who is Deputy Director of Spectrum Control, wrote a guidebook in 2022 for the maritime community to issue recommendations and guidelines, the main of which is to make sure that onboard documentation on the ship is accurate, that GPS reception is declared in onboard documentation, and when you have such cases, you need to inform us, inform the authorities, so that we can use it in diplomatic and legal processes so that we can put pressure on other countries. As I told you, we negotiate in COPs every 4 years. So you write to Catherine directly? Yes. Yes, for instance, write her email down. But since all countries have something to negotiate, even warring parties every 4 years, that gives you grounds for discussion and negotiation, even on such cases. I mean, it's not inevitable. The only thing that's specific to GPS reception is that very often it's unreported, and something that's not reported is considered as unknown by our Russian colleagues, and what's unknown is therefore not jammed by definition. Since it's the end, maybe we can run a couple of minutes late. Are there a couple of questions about that? Yes, please, sir. Please wait for a microphone. We're nearly there. There is a microphone here, miss, and I saw a hand going up there. 5 rows from the end. Much farther. Please raise your hand, sir.
My name is Petro from United Loss Adjusters. In the marine industry, we heard a lot recently about what you call dark fleets. These are tankers which are old, poor condition, and have caused a lot of GPS spoofing. My question to you guys, when they do these activities of GPS spoofing, do they require the assistance of a country, of a state to do this? Or this is purely companies that can operate by themselves and change the GPS? Thank you.
Je vais traduire à 2 niveaux. Donc la flotte fantôme.
So translating at 2 levels, the dark fleets, is that organized by the Russians, this jamming, or is that different, not necessarily the Russians behind it? That's my own translation and interpretation. You can translate that. Now, modern spoofing techniques are really easy to implement. You can find anything on the internet to implement that. And recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, we saw that spoofing technologies were more and more sophisticated. It's now within reach for everybody, really, if you want to be malicious. So either it's companies that don't want to be found or state players. But anyway, the technology is available for non-state players to use spoofing. It's not necessarily a big intelligence service. Yes, it's fairly simple. Where the question might be interesting for the audience and our colleagues working in insurance is who's responsible? Whose fault is it? This fleet that is unidentified, or at least that you suspect is remote controlled by a state, that's the same thing as what I said earlier. If there is equipment that causes spoofing on a ship, then it should be made, it should be on the license of the ship. However, it's clear that it's not going to be there. But the flag state of the ship needs to be understood that if they approve that, there should be consequences for it. The only thing is that I don't know of any case where somebody pressed official charges at the international level for GPS spoofing or jamming. For technical reasons, it's extremely difficult to do, and for the moment it hasn't taken place. If it hasn't taken place, we can't put pressure on these boats. But the flag state shouldn't think that it's clear of its responsibility. We need to be uncompromising, especially for those who come into European waters. One very last question. Yes, I'm sorry. Frédéric, I couldn't see you over there. Frédéric Denef from Garex. We've got 120 vessels which since October 2023 till December 2024 were attacked by missiles or drones in the region of the Red Sea. Can a ship owner use jamming techniques to protect their vessels from these types of attacks on merchant vessels? That's rather a matter of regulation than anything else, but militarily, preventative jamming on platforms is something that is used regularly. For the moment, that's one of the best ways, the simplest and the most inexpensive ways to protect yourself from low-cost strikes with civilian drones. That's the best way. Then in terms of frequency management, is that allowed or not? That's a different debate that I won't get into, but theoretically it's doable. And that's what foreign navies are doing. I'll answer about whether it's authorized or not, because I'm also the security officer of the ANFR, and in this respect, I'm involved in the organization of drone countermeasures or against such attacks to allow security services to do their job. Owning jamming equipment is prohibited. That's what means that you can't use it. Moreover, this jamming equipment, at least on French vessels or on the French territory, is considered as weapons, category A2 weapons, so weapons of war. From that perspective, you can't take justice into your own hands. I understand your requirements, but the only authorities that are allowed to use force or such weapons are security forces. The question of the protection of vital infrastructure operators or critical services remains to be discussed. I think it's now the case. The SGDSN, the General Secretariat for National Security and Defense, is holding this dialogue, but generally owning a weapon of war when you're a private company is something to be revised. What I know, what is being done by the French government to try and protect its own areas, well, having such a weapon on board a vessel right now is not authorized. That's a difficult act to follow. That's really cast a shadow over the discussion. But anyway, this is almost the end of this session. But if I was to ask you to take a helicopter view, and what's the takeaway from all that? Well, if you look at where the main events related to interactions with the frequency spectrum, radio, navigation, and television, that's mostly in conflict areas, geopolitical conflict areas. Why? Because we're so dependent on GPS and telecommunications that it really becomes a way to influence the enemy and interact with it. So these conflict areas, when unfortunately, well, you can see that how unstable the world is geopolitically, what's going to happen is that where there's going to be a conflict area, there's going to be a surge in these phenomena on all frequencies, radio, navigation, television, communications. And we're going to have to live with that, or at least learn how to do without and find ways and means to go around this unavailability of frequencies. I'll need to tell my teenage kids that they won't always be able to use 4G, or they'll have to come back to paper maps. Laura Brouillet. Well, there are solutions available, technical solutions, new constellations available at the European level, and we need to keep raising awareness about the existence of risk. You need to understand it and be able to reduce it with these solutions. Amar, on my side, the European Union is committed to having sovereign means, and I think it's high time it did. It's high time we remembered that we need to start using these means. As long as you do radio navigation with the system that was used and developed to guide missiles, and we're now using peaceful applications on boats and planes, will always be between the rock and a hard place here. But I do believe that we can use international bodies, as I said, by putting pressure, because everybody's got something to negotiate at some point or another. Frequency use is now so dense with everything you've said. We need to get used to the fact that sometimes it won't work. It's possible. But that's how things are going. And once again, of course, there are critical situations that emerge. But given the density of uses that we see every day, the number of occurrences remains low. Thank you ever so much to the three of you. I think they deserve a big hand.